Thank you. This is my second time ever to Krakow and the third time to Poland in 3 years, 3 successive years. So I would say that Krakow, I like it so much. Next time I'll be here with my family. So my name is Sunil and I work for Amazon AWS. Okay, this is not working. Okay. So I work for AWS as a principal technologist focused on AI, ML and streaming. You have to be familiar with Kinesis or SageMaker. Those are my focus. Apart from that, I'm also a member of Apache Foundation and I'm a committer on a few projects, and I also contribute to Apache Flink and Apache Beam, some of the streaming projects. So today I have two topics. This is number one, show of hands. How many of you do machine learning or data science here? 1, 2, 1, 1.5, okay. And I guess, okay, so it doesn't matter which one I pick now. So let me start off with, I'll just change the agenda. Can I start off with this one, with your permission? Okay. So this is about the machine translation. This is something I had worked on for the last 2 years at Amazon, mostly with Amazon folks in Berlin, based out of Berlin. And let me maximize this. And for folks familiar with machine translation before I start. So basically machine translation is you have text in one language and you want the AI to translate the text into a different language, the target language, okay? So today we'll be talking about what is machine translation, and NMT is neural machine translation using deep neural networks. SMT is statistical machine translation using statistical methods, the old-fashioned way. And we'll be looking at a few other NMT samples and the challenges and a small demo that I have. And a bit of a background around this. The first time I talked about this maybe back in 2017 in Berlin at Berlin Buzzwords, where me and a friend of mine, Tommaso from Rome, we talked about multilingual search. If you're familiar with search, most of the search in US and most of the world is done in English. Like if you do a Google search, you're doing the English text, right? But what if people want to search in the native languages, but you need to query the data which is stored in English, in French, and Polish or German, and you need to retrieve data from all the different languages. So it's kind of like a multi-language search. So that was probably the first step before we moved on to machine translation. So some of the tools we'll be looking at today will be like Flink, and we'll be looking at OpenNLP and with Apache Thrift. All of these are Apache projects. And we'll be looking at a statistical machine translation project from Johns Hopkins University called Joshua. And we'll be looking at a project from Amazon, which was open source by Amazon for neural machine translation called Sockeye. This was done in Amazon Berlin. And Sockeye is what powers Alexa today. So what is machine translation? So let's say if I'm trying to translate from German to English, my source language is German, my target language is English, right? So basically I'm trying to compute the probability distribution of translations. How do I know that my translation is good? If you're familiar with Bayesian statistics, I'm trying to compute the probability that if my string in the target language is English, which is E, and my source string is in Spanish, let's say, and it's F, what is the probability of E given F, right? And then you try to compute all the probabilities and then you pick the one with the maximum probability. So let's look at an example. So initially the first phase of machine translation was word-based back in the good old IBM days in 1980s and early 90s. So what they would do was, they would look at a word. For example, this, there's a background to this. When I did this talk, we first did this using German to English. Ever since, if you have seen any machine translation papers published or any of the talks, German to English is kind of like a hello world for machine translation. So I've kind of set a trend. So for example, if I look at this German word, Gebäude, it could mean a house or a tower or a building, right? So which one do I choose when I do my translation? So some words are more frequent than others. For instance, house and building are more common than, let's say, a tower, right? So if you look at the Wikipedia and you do a word count on Wikipedia in the English text, and how many times do you see house in all the English documents in Wikipedia? It's 5.28 billion times. So the probability is 5.28 billion out of whatever the total English corpus is, it's 0.51, right? Similarly for building, it's 0.4. And for tower, it is 0.09. So looking at these probabilities and going back to the formula that we had here, which is you pick the argmax or the maximum probability, I would naturally go and pick house as my first preference when I do the translation, right? So this was kind of like when you're doing a word-to-word translation, you have the English text at the top, Das Gebäude ist hoch, and the building is high, which is the English translation for that, the German to English. So you're trying to do a word-to-word mapping. So this word here in German maps to this word here in English. So the position number is 1 and the position number is 1 here. So 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4. Now, is that going to scale? No, it's not. So basically you're defining an alignment function mapping each word to the next word. But that's definitely not going to scale, because the next example shows you that a single German word is actually 3 English words, right? You cannot do a one-to-one mapping. So for example, this one, Hochhaus means a high-rise building. So there's the one-to-one mapping that we had would not work for this. So the next step was obviously word-based translation was not going to scale. So the next phase was to actually go with a phrase-based translation, wherein you take a bunch of words and translate the whole words together. So in a phrase-based model, for example, this one, Berlin. So you'll see Berlin a lot because this was the first time I did this talk was in Berlin. And yeah, ever since I've learned some German too. So Berlin ist ein herausragendes Kunst- und Kulturzentrum. I got that right. Okay. So Berlin is an outstanding art and cultural center, right? So here, a single word, this one here, Kunstzentrum, it translates to art and cultural center, right? If I had done a word-to-word translation, that would not be mapping there. I would not be able to map that. So in phrase-based translation, the foreign input is segmented into phrases. You take your sentence and segment that into phrases. And you take the phrase and try translating the phrase into the target language. And then you got to reorder the words just so that it makes semantic sense in the target language. So the alignment function for a phrase-based translation would be that in word-based translations, the words would be translated as atomic units. In phrase-based models, translate phrases as atomic units. Instead of words, the phrases would be the atomic units. So the advantage of this is that many-to-many translations can handle non-compositional phrases, especially in German language, given how vast it is and how incredibly long the words get. Like for example, I have so the train that actually goes and cleans up all the stones on railway tracks, picks up the stones, washes them, and it makes sure that they're sharp edges, it sharpens them, and dries the stones and puts the stones back on the railway tracks. And there is a word for that, Gleichschottenbettenreinigungsmaschine. So that's the complete word for that. Okay, that describes the noun as well as the actions the noun does. Okay. So sometimes the advantage is that when you have that incredibly long sentences or compositional phrases, then the phrase-based translation scales better than word-based translation. And the more data you have, the longer phrases can be learned, right? So this was kind of the standard model that Google was using for Google Translate until 2016. And yeah, until 2016, something big happened in Google, and that's when they switched on this to something else. So once you encode your data, how do you decode it? So again, the decoding is again a mathematical model for translation. So you take the best translation with the highest probability again for when you decode it. And when you do that, there are 2 types of errors that are possible. So the most probable translation that you got might be bad. For example, something like this is a good boy may not be the right translation. He is a good boy is a better translation than that, right? So, and sometimes when you're trying to do a search, a multilingual search, the search might not find the most probable translation. So at which point you got to do a search, fix the search engine. So this is the background behind the translation from word-based to phrase-based, and then none of these scaled well enough. So in 1990s, people came up with, so then the next one was in 2016, Google came up with neural machine translation. So neural machine translation, so folks working with deep neural networks here, or deep learning, any kind of deep learning? Hi. So have you used recurrent neural networks? No. Okay, so if you're doing NLP, you'll be handling a lot of recurrent neural networks. So the way the neural machine translation works is, you generate the translations from neural network models trained on bilingual corpora. So I could have a German and an English, and I feed both German and English as inputs to my deep neural network. Okay, and the translation happens as a probability distribution, 1 word at a time, no phrases. And this function that you see here, it's called a softmax function. So the probability of basically you're taking the probability of occurrence of a word divided by the probability of occurrences of all the words. Okay, so that's called a softmax function. And the next one here, when you're training any machine learning algorithm, you need to define a loss function. So this is the loss function for deep neural network for training machine translation. And it's called a Shannon entropy, if you're familiar with Claudia Shannon's information theory. So in 2016, Google published a paper called Attention is All You Need. Okay, and this totally revolutionized the field of machine translation from the way people had been doing machine translation until 2016. And so basically what you're looking at here is a deep neural network, and it's called an attention transformer network, right? And let me see if I have a slide that can explain this. So basically what you're doing here is, this is a deep neural network, and the output is a softmax at the top. And so the input is, you're creating an embedding of your input, of your, let's say if I'm trying to translate German to English, I create a word embedding of my German, and I feed that to a batch normalization network. It's called batch. I don't want to get into what batch normalization is. It's a deep learning concept. And then you feed that into a batch normalization network, and then the output of that is fed into a bunch of other networks. It's kind of stacked one on top of the other. And the final output is a softmax, which gives you the probability and the most likely translation. So until 2016, I told you that Google has been using statistical machine translation until 2016. So if you look at this graph from University of Edinburgh, and the x-axis is the years, different years, and the y-axis is the number of times, the quality of the translations from Google Translate. Okay, so if you see that 2013, 2014, 2015, it's all blue, and the blue is statistical and the pink is neural. And from 2016 onwards, you see that there's a big spike here in the orange. So that's when Google switched from their old-fashioned way of doing things to this particular paper. That's when the paper was published, right? So what are the advantages of using statistical machine translation versus neural machine translation? So we are looking at Apache Joshua. Apache Joshua is an Apache project from Johns Hopkins University, and I can show you the project here. So this is from Johns Hopkins University, and this is based on statistical machine translation, right? So this was what was being used at Amazon and Google until 2016. And so now, why should you switch from statistical machine translation to neural machine translation? Now Sockeye is a project from Amazon, which is again from, you can find it on GitHub, it's open source. It's from Amazon Berlin. So yeah, so this is on open source, it's Apache licensed, and so this was created based on Apache MXNet deep learning framework. That's what is powering Sockeye, and Sockeye is also being used now for Alexa, for doing Alexa search and translations. So we'll compare Sockeye and Joshua that we saw before. So Joshua is statistical SMT, statistical machine translation, and Sockeye is neural machine translation. So if you look at this, Joshua had reasonable quality translations, and Sockeye had very high quality translations. And this was all done in Java and C++, and this is all in Python and C++. And so every model that you translate, for example, German to English will have a model, and English to German would be a different model. So the model size with statistical machine translation was quite huge, 60 gigs to 120 gigs, depending on how big your model is. And the model size with Sockeye was much smaller. It's a neural machine translation framework, and it's much smaller, 256 MB. And the training process here is more complicated, and this is a much simpler training process. As long as you can afford to pay for GPUs, you can just throw the data in. And the code here is like several thousand lines of code, and it's only about 400 lines of code, Python code here. And the translation costs here are low, and the translation costs here are high because you got to pay for GPUs and you got to use GPUs.
But why for translation you are using GPU?
Because this is a deep learning framework, and it's initially
it's trained. So
it's trained, yeah. So you can actually use CPUs if you can afford that. But the fact that you got the translation cost for deep learning translation costs, the inference on deep learning is expensive because number one, I forget what was the reason for this. I think the number one reason being that you had to use GPUs, because we're always using GPUs for deep learning. For the training these models, we are using GPUs. So when I did this, but you could be right. You can use CPUs as well.
Isn't it just simply that you have a neural network, you just need to run this neural network, and that costs compared to just looking up in the table?
But it's only one iteration. if you have train.
I know, but
Yeah,
still,
but-
you still need to propagate to the.
Yeah, I mean, inference is one
I know
iteration.
it's not bad, but it's still more than just looking at the tables.
Okay.
And if you do it many times.
Okay, so if you look at this, and the green ones are the what you need when you choose a way. So obviously, based on this, you can see that the neural machine translation way is a much better approach. So I trained a Sockeye model using for German to English, and for that, if you are looking into training models, and if you are looking for the training data, you can look at Europal Corpus, which is open sourced by a bunch of universities here in Europe. So European Parallel Corpus, and this is all open source. So you have data for Bulgarian to English, and you can download this data. So this sentence in Bulgarian lines up with this sentence in English, and you can feed that directly to a deep learning machine. So this is free. It's an open source data set you can use for training your data. So let's look at some samples of machine translation. Okay, so that's the original German sentence, and that's the English translation. And if any German speakers here, you can tell me how good it is. Not too great, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the next example. This is better. Okay, so let's look at next example when translations go totally wrong for many reasons. So what is wrong here? Is it Dutch? Number one, no. Okay, so language detection is wrong. So next, since language detection is wrong, the translation would be wrong. But then it did translate. So what is the difference in the translation and this? An extra space around the plus here. Right? So this is Microsoft Bing. So Twitter was using Microsoft Bing for translations until like last year. They switched to Google Translate as of 2019. Okay, so the challenge, obviously, let's talk about the challenges when you're trying to train neural machine translation models. So one of the challenges is that deep learning machines are neural networks. They only understand one input, which is a tensor or a vector, right? A tensor or a vector, a multidimensional. So if you have text, raw text, how do you need to convert that into a vector of some form so that you can feed that to a deep neural machine for training purposes and for translation purposes. So how do you represent a word from the text as a vector? So this brings us to something called an embedding layer, which would be the first layer of your deep neural machine that you feed in. So the embedding layer is basically you take all your words and you create a vectors for each of the words. So for example, if my input has dog, cat, giraffe, fox, bird, car, plane, I create a vector. It's a one-hot encoding. I use a one-hot encoding kind of a thing. And so for each of them, I create a unique vector, and I feed this vector as my embedding layer to the deep neural machine. Right? So obviously, if you cannot accommodate every word that you see in the language. So the text I trained it with only has, for example, for this one, when I trained my model, I only had about 30,000 German words. But German language is huge, and there's much more to it than just 30,000 words that I picked up. So how do you account for all the unseen words, and how do you make sure that your translations work despite the fact that you have very less training data? So that brings us to something that came out of University of Edinburgh, research that came out of University of Edinburgh. It's called byte pair encoding. So, and this is the famous paper that came out in 2016 again by Rico Sendrick and these folks from Edinburgh. Neural machine translation of rare words with subword units proceeding. Subword units. So let me show an example of what this is. So this is my text, okay, positional, addition, contextual. Now what does byte pair encoding do? Byte pair. Byte pair is you take two successive bytes and encode that as a different byte. So for example, I see that TI are occurring very often here. So I can replace TI with an X. Okay, so this is what you get. Now I see that ON or AL and AL also are frequently occurring here. I replace AL with a Y. Now I can recursively replace IX and IX with a different character, or XO and XO with a different character. So I keep doing this, and basically what am I doing here? It's kind of a model compression. I'm trying to represent a lot of data with a very small number of bytes, in a very small number of bytes. So I keep doing this, and so if I run this for my text, this is what I get. Okay. So this is called byte pair encoding. So you take two successive bytes, frequently occurring bytes, and replace them with a different byte. Okay, and you keep doing that recursively until you have the bare minimal left, whatever is left. So what are the challenges when you do neural machine translation? So let's say if I'm trying to translate a bunch of sentences, one sentence is 100 words long and other one is only 10 words long, and the third one is 43 words long. So I have a lot of uneven sentences, right? So what happens is, this is how it looks. So I take the size of the longest sentence, which could be like, in this case it's 17 word tokens. And what I do is, for the other sentences that do not have 17 tokens, let's say if I have a word with 4 tokens, I pad the remaining 13 bytes with some dummy character. So I pad all my bytes. It's called byte padding, right? Once I do this, I sort them I sort them first, and this is what I get. Now what I can do this, I can take batches of these and send them to different GPUs for translation. So I can kind of distribute it across different GPUs, right? So I can take batch 1, batch 2, batch 3. So this is the reason you have to do this is because you want to optimize your GPU compute costs. And if you are taking a cloud provider, if you are running this on a cloud provider, obviously you want to do this. Otherwise, you'll be paying massive bills for GPU clusters. So this is a clever optimization that you will run into. Okay, so I'll skip this. So TVM is a project that is in Apache right now. It's called Apache TVMs. And basically what it does is, it's called Tensor Intermediate Representation. And it kind of optimizes your deep learning code in the backend to run optimizes it for the specific hardware, for Intel CPUs or NVIDIA GPUs or any other processors. So it kind of generates the backend code. And it works with deep learning frameworks to provide end-to-end compilation to different backends. So it could be in GPUs or CPUs. And actually now I need to update that. It's now an Apache project. It's not DMLC anymore. I'll skip this part. So I have trained my machine learning model, and I have trained a model that translates from my German to English. So what do I do? How do I use this? How do I put it into production, right? And there's two ways I can do it. I can either put it in run it as a batch job on a MapReduce cluster, as a Hadoop MapReduce job, or I could put it into Spark or Flink or any of the frameworks around and plug it in. So in this case, what I did is, since I work for AWS, I took that model and I trained the model and I deployed the model on SageMaker, AWS SageMaker, and exposing the model as a REST endpoint. Now, in this example, we are looking at, I'll show you a demo. We'll be looking at ingesting Twitter feed live from, with all the German text, German Twitter feed. We'll be translating the German Twitter feed to English. So along the way, we'll be doing a bunch of things. When you're talking about natural language processing, the first thing you've got to do is language detection. Okay, you got to only filter out the German ones. You just want to keep only the German ones. And then once you get the German tweets, you got to break the tweets up into sentences, individual sentences. So you got to use a German sentence detection model. Once you have the sentence, you got to break up the sentence into tokens, each word. Since a neural machine translation only understands words, if we go back to the slide that we had earlier, and each word needs to be represented as a one hot encoding in the embedding layer. And then once we do that, we do a byte pair encoding, because we have trained our model using byte pair encoding. So you got to, at the time of inference or runtime, you got to use byte pair encoding in order for the translation to work. And my model is running on SageMaker, so I have a SageMaker client. So all of this part until the SageMaker client is running as a Flink pipeline. And for this part, I'm using an OpenNLP with a German sentence detection and a tokenization and byte pair encoding. Okay, so let's switch to demo mode. So open up IntelliJ. View. So how do you do presentation mode in IntelliJ? They changed it. Oh, okay, can you see? Is it clear? At least visible? Yeah?
Like the next view.
Okay. So let me do this. Let me run this. And let's hope it works. Okay, so I'll pull this guy up. So what I'm doing now is I'm directly ingesting German tweets live from Twitter and translating that using the AWS SageMaker, my model that's in the AWS SageMaker. So let's see the tweets come in. So when I did this, one thing I did notice is most of the German tweets are racist, are Naziist, are profane. So 3 different categories. So racist, Nazi, are profane. And during the summertime, they stop tweeting after 4 p.m. in the evening. That's when they go to beer gardens. Okay, so can you see that? Can you read that? So the first line is German, from the German tweet, and the second line is the translation that came through. So the translation seems okay, but then initially I had to benchmark my model against something more, against some baseline. So I tried benchmarking it using Google Translate. And as I said, the German tweets are profane. So for example, the word for F is fricken in German. And the translation, English translation showed up as FUQQ. Okay? And so I ran the same thing to Google Translate. Google Translate matched it with FUQQ. So yeah, my model is good. So that is. Okay, so yeah, so this is live German tweets that are flowing through, and we're just translating them in real time. So what is a giant business where few earn little and many? So yeah, that doesn't make sense. So I got to fix that. Okay, so yeah, this is machine translation, and I'll stop the demo here. So this is exactly the workflow that we are going through. So we are ingesting the Twitter stream, and we are using Flink's Twitter source, and I'm running it through some OpenNLP models for German, and I'm using the SageMaker client, which is RPC client, and I'm calling Sockeye, which is running in AWS cloud. So this is the complete Flink pipeline for this. So what we saw here can be condensed to this part here. Okay. So future work, after I did this, last year I worked on a project like, if folks are working in the search space, anyone working in the search or search relevance space. So when you do a search, how do you make sure that you get the most relevant results, right? If I'm searching for coronavirus, I want the top 3 results that I want. I don't want number 10 because I don't want to go all the way down, scroll all the way down. So there's something called search relevance. They use relevance in your search to rank the search results and put the top ones, to put the ones that are most relevant to the top. So I took the same idea of search relevance. Why not put the same idea to machine translation? So when you do machine translation, you have about 10 different sentences to pick from, and you can use the maximum probability. Okay, so maximum probability is again a statistical way of doing it. So why not, use something like a relevance, a different machine learning model. Relevance is basically you're training a different machine learning model like an XGBoost to rank your translations. So the way it works is you take your Google Translate and you take a different baseline like what I have here, and you take both of them to train a relevance machine translation model, and then use that to rank the Sockeye translations. So it's a little convoluted, and I got some of it to work, and I'll be publishing a paper on that soon, sometime this year. So the future work is you can train in neural machine translation models not in a batch way wherein you have a Europol corpus sitting on a disk and then you run your feed that to your machine translation to your deep learning network. You can actually do it in real-time streams. And how do you do that in real-time streams? Because in real-time streams, you're taking each data point as it's flowing through and you discard the data point, unlike a batch wherein you can keep iterating over the same set of data multiple times across several iterations. So basically the way to do it in a real streaming way is to ingest 2 different streams, my German and my English as 2 different streams, and then you do a join on the streams. And there's something called stateful stream processing. Stateful stream processing is you can keep the state of your computation in the streams. So if you look at a stream as a bunch of data points that are flowing through, and then you define your windows on those streams, like this window is 100 data points, and you have the next window of 100 data points, and you compute your stats for this 100 data points and you store that in memory, and then you have the next 100 data points, you compute your stats on that, and you can average those stats with the ones in the memory and update your memory. So it's stateful stream processing, and that's a totally unexplored area. It's kind of like there's a lot of research that's happening in KTH Stockholm, if you're familiar with that. It's a Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. So those guys are working on this. They're actually looking at how do you do machine learning and deep learning on iterative streams. They're trying to define iterations on streams, even though you don't see the data point again. Once you process the data point, you discard it. They're trying to define, how can you do some kind of an iterative computations on that. And so using stateful stream processing, you can kind of, can do both training and inference using something called a broadcast state. So once you update your state value, you can broadcast the state value to all the different streams across the network. And then, everyone is aware of the latest values. Okay, some credits for this. So if you look at some of the links that I have, attention is all you need is a Google paper that came out in 2016. And Sockeye, the Sockeye training tutorial, they have tutorials there. And so this is a slide and the code. Questions? Okay. No questions. Okay, so
You perhaps working on the translation for the Alexa as well?
So this Sockeye, let me open up Sockeye. Yeah, Sockeye is the guys who worked on Sockeye are now part of the Alexa team in Berlin. So it is being used to power Alexa.
Just wondering if you're working on the Polish models.
So the one thing I did ask them is, are they going to ever maintain models like Joshua? You have seen a bunch of models, pre-trained models available, right? So are they ever going to publish models like that, pre-trained models? So they said somebody has got to maintain all the models every month. You got to keep updating those models and pre-training the models every month. And number two reason is the models might not be useful for, it might be useful for Europe, but not to America or to India. So they don't have the data set for India. So basically the long story short is that they're just going to open source the code. The reason behind open sourcing the code is that anybody can train their own models using this code. So as opposed to publishing the models, just use the code to train your own models. Yeah.
So Sockeye is making the translation between any pair of languages, right?
Yeah.
So it's not having like this common model for like multiple.
You cannot have a common model. So German to English is not the same as English to German.
Yeah.
Okay. Machine translation is not a symmetric function.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a symmetric function. Only if you're dealing with Sanskrit, yes. But none of the languages are symmetric. So I can take a text in German, I can translate that into English, I can again translate the English back to German, I will not get back the same German. So, but you can use that as a kind of a data augmentation technique if you want to increase your training data size. So translate your stuff from English to German and translate it back to English, you get a different English sentence. So your training set has increased. Now translate that to French and translate French back to English, you'll have your training set has gone up by 4x. So that's a good augmentation technique. Okay, so we are.
Yeah, so first let's for the first talk.